Okay, this is back. And let me just start over. Okay. So, we're getting into the magical merriment moments. Oh, Jessica Zweig. Look at that. Hello. Uh this just in from Magical Merriment Moments. What are your things that were happy that you experienced last week? If you're over on Instagram, come on over to YouTube, youtube.com/Mary England. It's much more fun over there, especially when I'm making sound. Okay, so the Magical Merriment Moments are things that you got to experience this week, things that are you're grateful for, things that you got to experience, things that you're grateful for, really, just some fun stuff that you got to experience. So let me tell you and show you my little slideshow here. Mine were listening to my family on Thanksgiving tell me their gratitude lists. I printed out these little gratitude lists for everybody to share, and then I made everybody list them out. I also shared them in my free Facebook group that you can join yourself on. You can find that on my uncustomary.org website, and I shared that as a printable. And then I made everybody, list them out, and then we got to share and went around the room, and it was really interesting to hear what everybody shared. And another thing that was a magical merriment moment for me was when my mom gave me this book of classic literature. You can see the picture here. These books are crazy cool. Very, very, very cool. And really old, and like just these absolute classics. I feel smart just owning them. And then the other one was seeing this dog put his head out the window of this car. And I thought that was just really cute. I love when dogs put their head out of the car. Okay. April saying, our friends moved out of the state, sadly, but we got to help them move and they got to spend quality time with them before they come back. That's wonderful. One of my really good friends is leaving the state as well, and I'm getting to spend quality time with them as well. So I definitely feel you on that. If anybody else wants to share what they got to experience this week, I would love to know. Okay, and taking this up a notch, sharing good news. Have you seen anything really good happen this week? The difference between good news and magical merriment moments are like gratitude moments, and then good news is like when you see people doing something kind out in the world. So I saw this moment where there was a USPS worker, a postal worker that was walking and delivering mail on foot. And then there was a FedEx worker who was driving, and they kind of like had this solidarity moment. And as they were passing each other, the FedEx worker like put their arm up, and the USPS worker like had their packages, but then they also just kind of like, they had this really cute moment, and I thought that was really nice and sweet. And yeah, I thought that was really sweet. So, have you seen any good news, or have you heard about any in the past week? You can share that in the comments. And while you're doing that, I'm going to share some good news that I also saw in the news, because not everything that happens in the world is bad, and that's actually our topic for today. But this just in, we have something really interesting happen. There was Thanksgiving this past week, and in South Carolina, police officers were pulling people over, and wait for it, instead of giving them tickets, they were giving them turkeys for Thanksgiving. I love that. That's really funny. I mean, you get that like adrenaline rush from getting pulled over, but then it turns into this really great outcome. Okay, so um, I love that. And you can see the picture here if you're over on YouTube, youtube.com/Mary England. You can see the picture of this guy, this police officer giving the turkey instead of the parking ticket, and her face just so happy. I love that. Okay, so today, as usual, we're going to talk about our topic, and then we're going to, um, you know, do some coaching and Q&A, and I'll tell you who won the giveaway, and I'll give you some homework, and we'll do a card from the deck. And while you're here at this moment, if you're feeling kind, if you're watching the replay even, Please hit the subscribe button. Please like and share this video. Even if you're live, it really helps, as many people deserve to feel happy as possible. And in the description, you can also tip me. Okay, so let's also talk about what you're doing right now before we get into this. Can you say yes to these questions? I want to know if you can say yes to the following questions. Do you complete 9 out of 10 projects that you start? How many of these questions can you say yes to? Let's start there. Out of all of these questions, can you say yes to all of them? Do you complete 9 out of 10 projects that you start? Do you feel happy 6 out of 7 days a week? Do you feel connected to a sense of purpose? Do you feel like a real artist? Do you not compare yourself to other people? Do you love your body? Do you get excited to wake up in the morning? Do you enjoy and not resent the way you spend your time? Do you believe in yourself? If you answered yes to all of those, then that's fantastic, and I love you, and I'm so proud of you, and you don't need merriment making. You've got it down. You are a plus merriment maker at the next level. And if you said no to any of those, then I really want you to consider joining the Merriment Makers. And right now, you can get 50% off your first month. And that's until really just today, the next day, and the next day. And then the sale ends, and then on December 1st, the price is going up. So there is, a real incentive right now to join. And also there's bonuses. So when you join now, there's access to all of my Zodiac personal development workshops. We uploaded all of those, and those are worth $1,222 just alone. And then there's also my merriment making book. You get the PDF. You don't get the whole course, but you do get the PDF, and that's $100. So just the bonuses are $1,300 plus. And then we just did a masterclass yesterday. And if I sell that alone, that would go for $88. So you're getting in for a first month for $44. And you could technically cancel when you get in, and you're locking in your price, by the way. You're locking in your price for the lower price at $88 a month. And it's going up to $222. That's how much it's going up to, okay? So if you want to, this is the lowest that it's ever going to be forever, because I've done 10 years of work on this program, and there's thousands of hours of stuff in here. So it's going up to resemble and represent how much work is in here. So the Merriment Makers membership has an enormous amount of things inside of it. You get 1,000 resources, you get monthly mail, you get daily texts, you get weekly merriment missions, you get a bunch of stuff. So I want you to consider, if you said no to any of those questions, that maybe it would be time for you to invest in yourself and take advantage of our sale. Okay, so that's only going on for the next couple days. At the end of the day on November 29th, the sale ends, and on December 1st, the price goes up. Okay, so this week's topic, oh, and you can get that, you can see it on the scroller at uncustomary.org/merriment-makers, and only $44 to start. And you can also find that on uncustomary.org or the link in my bio if you're on Instagram. Okay. Alrighty, where are we? So today our topic is spreading good news. So there is a podcast on this, and we're going to cover some of the stuff that's already been on the podcast, and you can also re-listen to that if you prefer learning in that way. And I want to know, if you're here, if you're listening on either platform, what you think of when you think of news. What do you think of when news comes up for you? Do you have like a visceral reaction? Do you think of being informed? Do you think of, being educated? Do you get like an immediate sense of panic? Do you think like, everything is going to be horrible? Like, what is it that you think of when you think of good, or not good news, but just news? Just news. Is it like very neutral for you? Is it something that's like, oh, well, we have to do this. We have to be learning about the news. Is it, what is it about news that feels, that pops up in your head for you? What happens? And from there, maybe we can just kind of identify moving forward. But I want to first acknowledge the first thing that I say in my podcast about this, which is, as merriment makers, it's our goal to create, share, and spread kindness. And part of that is good news, right? And joy. And we can't ignore the fact that a huge part of the reason for spreading joy is to counterbalance the negative, right? The fear, the anguish, the sadness. And a big reason for that is the overwhelm of not just bad, but depressing and horrific news. Okay. So when we say, yeah, okay, so we have, I feel depressed because of all the bad news. Yeah. Bad news. Good news, bad news, right? We have good news, bad news. So what does good news mean to you? Think about that for a second too. And what does bad news mean to you? Start with the bad news. Start with bad news. What does bad news mean to you? And when I think bad news, I want to get really real about what bad news means for a second. It means weather, climate change, earthquakes, things that are, hurting people and the earth, pandemics, sickness, hunger, poverty, homelessness, unclean water, again, things that are affecting people in a negative way. And by that I mean hurting them physically, making them sick, and killing them. And then we mean people. We mean people and the actions that they're taking towards other people and the world, right? We mean their negligence. We mean their lack of compassion. We mean racism, sexism, ageism, xenophobia. We mean crime. We mean acts of violence from one person to another. We mean acts of terrorism. We mean a lot of really negative stuff. When we say news, we are saying one word that's encompassing a lot of the things that I just listed, and it's really a lot. It's a lot. I once heard, and I don't know that I have no foundation if this is true or not, and I don't even know that if it was true that I would agree. But I don't know that I would agree with this truth. That the word genocide was created so that we didn't have to think about what that meant. And I don't like that, because that's just what words are, right? Like, news is a word that describes something, and genocide is something that describes something. All words do that. Words encompass a meaning. And but I do think that there's some power in the idea that if there is a word, we don't have to think and be really intimate with what the definition of that word is. When we say news, we have allowed ourselves to disassociate from the intimacy of the acts happening to and by people, just like us. I think the word news can really remove the humanity from our fear, horror, and grief. And that also means that it can remove our joy from the good news and the nuance of what can be good and bad, and how little it takes for something to be good as well. So, I mean, if you want to learn more about the nuances, the intricacies, and the timeline of how it got to be this bad, how the media is kind of like preying on us, and when the first printed news started, how our human nature and our negativity bias really kind of goes around this in a circle, and how we objectively react stronger to negative news, and why, and when all the bad news kind of started in the early 2010s and all of this, then you can listen to the podcast, because I'm not gonna repeat all of that. But and also there's a whole section in the podcast about taking responsibility I share a story about when I left Baltimore during the riots and got to see how other people were experiencing the news of something that was happening here, and how that was kind of like when I lost my faith in having blind trust in the news, because I saw how they were portraying something that I was seeing firsthand. And once you see that happening, you kind of have to understand that it's not that nobody has journalistic integrity, it's that you have to understand that there's a bigger picture. And yeah, so if you want to look into that, there's the podcast for that. But I don't want to duplicate every single piece of content here today. I I mentioned that we gloss over the bad news, maybe just with the term news, and I I I want to be clear that I don't want to, as people say, like be toxically positive or spiritually bypass or whatever words you want to use. I want to make sure that when we are spreading good news, we are conscious of the fact that we're doing it because we need it, right? We do want to fulfill the deficit, fill the hole, express from the hole that has been created. And also, even if we had somehow satiated that hole that had been filled or that had been created, right? There's a hole, there's a wound, and we had, for lack of a better term, compensated for that effectively. We would still, as human beings, need to see positivity more. It wouldn't just be like, okay, we've done it, we've compensated enough, and now we're neutral. Because we are overall positive beings. So seeing a representation of positivity propels us forward in society. Positivity is what creates movement, inventions, everything. We do not thrive on negativity. I mean, you do, but in a different way. So I don't want us to constantly live in fear. I want us to add opportunities on the other side of the spectrum. I don't I want us to use the opportunities we have with journalism to dedicate, like, I'm not saying that we should stop reporting on what's happening. I want to make that clear as well. I'm not advocating that we stop reporting on what's corrupt and what's happening in the truth and the weather and, all of the things that the news can have the potential to do. I think the news is the news. The news is literally just stuff that happens, that's being documented and reported on. The problem is that we do this thing where we slant it towards negativity, we fearmonger, and I'm suggesting if we didn't spend a full hour regurgitating stuff that had been done the hour before, and maybe we dedicated like 30% of the hour to stuff that was fulfilling our faith in humanity, renewing our faith in humanity, because most of us at the current point in this time frame are a little bit disenchanted and disillusioned with what's happening. We need more balanced news. And I don't think that we should necessarily have to choose between good news and bad news. There are good news networks, and I'll give you a list of channels where you can find those. Most of them, unfortunately, are online. However, not on TV is what I mean. There's not like a CNN for good news on on the TV. But I just don't understand why, as of right now, there is not a network that is just equally divided, even between what feels like a balance. Remember though that the news is literally just stuff that happened. Someone decided that it was newsworthy. Have you ever seen something on the news and been like, why? Why is this getting 20 minutes? This is so silly. There's plenty of stuff that happened in the past 24 hours that could be on the news. Anything. Literally anything. Like a grandma making cookies. Like that is news. That's news if you want it to be. If an editor was like, and the producer and whoever on the team was like, that is absolutely something I want to put on the TV, it would be on the TV. So I'm suggesting that what's going on the TV is cut through the lens and the angle and the values of a network that is being filtered down. And maybe I want to expand those values into representing joy, kindness, and fun. So some of us are also really addicted to drama, to chaos. I think drama gives us a little bit of a defense reaction, so I'll say chaos. A lot of us grew up in chaotic households, and therefore we need to kind of fulfill that peace so we feel like there is something happening still. And the news is a really good way to make sure that that's happening, especially because it's outside of us. And it's another way that we can kind of place blame, and we can say, well, I can't, be happy. I can't achieve my goals because all of these things are happening out in the world. I see a lot of posts about how Gen Z and millennials can't have faith or accomplish their passions or whatever it is because of how many things that they've experienced in their lifetime growing up, how many pandemics they've seen, how many world crises they've seen. And I'm not arguing that there's not a lot. I'm also going to say that the boomer generation and Gen X has seen all of that and more. So yes, there are absolute negative things that come with each generation, but if we're going to blame the news or the world situation or whatever it is that is the reason for why we can't do something, then you will absolutely not be able to do it because you're looking for a reason. So my point is that if you are looking at the news consistently, it's kind of just like picking a scab. You're like, okay, well, at least this other chaotic thing is happening outside of me that I really have like no control over, and it doesn't even happen near me. And I wouldn't have any way to know about this 30 years ago, but like, now I do. And I'm going to be upset about it because they told me to be upset about it. And now I'm going to really worry and ruminate over this. And that's going to be the reason that I can't do anything today because I'm very, very upset over it. I'm very, very anxious about what's happening in this state, in this country, in this other place that and then we start getting into labels. And I'm also very empathetic and can get deeply lost in this wormhole of what's happening. And that's another reason why I know I need to not watch the news. I'm not saying to not be informed. I'm not saying that you don't want to know what's happening, but also, do you need to know everything? Maybe we can be deliberate with the causes that we care about. Maybe if you really care about, a specific aspect of politics or a specific cause or charity or whatever it is, then you devote time every week to figuring out what's happening in that department. If there's a department store of Target, there are places of Target that I never go unless I really need something, right? Like, I don't go into Target and go to the luggage section every time. I have no idea what's going on in the luggage section or the sports section. I just really don't know. Or the camping section. You know what I mean? Like, I don't go in there. I pretty much know what's happening in like that front part with the accessory section though. I have a pretty good idea of like what's happening in there. So what if that was like your news? What if you only checked in with the news of the accessories department or whatever that is for you? And those were the aisles that you refreshed on. But if Target is CNN or whatever channel, and you are watching CNN, you're basically walking up and down every single aisle of Target and trying to figure out what's new here. I'm looking for every single new thing and I'm trying to figure out what's changed, what's new. I'm trying to take in all of this stimulus. It's too many aisles. It's too many aisles and it's frustrating to try to know what's going on. You can't take in all of that information. You just can't. And it's taking way too long, way too much stuff out of your day. So if you're used to walking up and down every aisle, that's okay. But we also need to try to develop a new habit. Can you walk in with a very specific written down to-do list when you go into Target and say, I'm only going to go in these 3 aisles and I'm allowed to linger in these aisles, and maybe it ends up taking the same amount of time or it'll take less, but even if it takes the same amount of time, you end up being more thorough in those spaces. Yeah. So if you are a news kind of like picker, you have it on in the background, you're constantly refreshing, whatever. I know that one of the reasons will be like, what am I going to do if I'm not informed or whatever. I know so many people who have like gone the other way, and they figured it out. Like they if something happens, they find out. People let you know. And if you really are worried that people won't let you know, that you have no one in your life to let you know, that's actually the real fear. You know what I mean? That actually is a connection and support issue that needs to be worked on. And you're kind of replacing your connection and support with the news. So that's another topic. And maybe we can replace watching the news with connecting to new people. And going outside. Going outside is actually the answer for most things. But, I mean, I remember during the pandemic, there was this guy that, like, he went on, like, a retreat in a cabin, and he had no idea that there was a pandemic. When he came out, it had been going on for, like, 8 months, and he comes out, and everybody's wearing masks, and he's just like, what's going on? And then he asked someone at like a store, and they told him, and they were like, where have you been under a rock? And he's like, I mean, kind of. You know what I mean? Like, it was fine. It was fine. He just learned the information when it was time for him to learn it, and then he adapted. And I don't know. If you really want to know something, you'll figure it out. And if you, I don't know, I just don't think that it's really that bad. Most people that I know that have stopped watching the news have not had a serious situation. And this is coming from a place of privilege too. Like, if you're living in a war-torn country, then honestly, you're probably not watching the news every day, and you're probably not watching this either. You know what I mean? Like, there's a different situation. If you have the luxury of watching the news every day, then you're probably not on the run. So, different perspectives of life. Different levels. Not levels, but you know what I mean. Different walks. Okay, so news are just things that are happening. It's just events. And it's stuff that we think is worthy enough to report on and share. So, what if we start making our own good news? What if you start thinking that doing kind and compassionate, helpful, positive, and uplifting things are good enough to share? I remember hearing somebody say once that the difference between you and an influencer is that they think that what they're doing is good enough to share on the internet. You ever see like somebody just like making their coffee and dancing around? I mean, I do it. And then just like posting it online, and then you're like, why did you do that? and they do it all day, and then they have a bajillion followers or whatever, and you're like, oh, the reason that they're making a successful influencing business is because they're valuing their life enough to document it, and they're doing something fun. So what if we just, like, I don't want to say lowered the bar, but changed and manipulated our expectations of what is news? Right now, we have been conditioned to think that news is someone getting stabbed or a war happening or a crisis. And I want you to rechannel your brain into thinking that news is when a dog sticks his head out of the window. I want you to start thinking that news is girl gets really cool pair of scissors at the store. News is finally put together my desk that was sitting in a box for 6 months. News is set up my new studio. News is 2 people meet and they were both nervous, but they both made it happen. Like, news is good stuff. News is, we had breakfast tacos today. I had never had breakfast tacos before. Didn't know breakfast tacos were a thing. News is anything that can go in your gratitude journal. Anything that makes you smile. News is something that happened. The only difference between good news and bad news is whether you liked it or not. And then there's levels of how good it can be and how bad it can be. And what's good for you is not necessarily good for somebody else. So, start doing, and then also, being the good that you wish to see. We cannot, as merriment makers, we cannot complain that we want to see more good news. We cannot say, I'm so depressed about the news. I hate the news. I hate the way people report on the news. Da 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 da. If we are not doing something about it, and by doing something about it, I mean not just talking about this here, this is a great start, but that we start doing kind, compassionate, helpful, positive, and uplifting things, and documenting them. Documenting them is part of the news. Journalism, news, doesn't really matter if you don't take a picture. Sorry, picture it didn't happen with the news. That's how the news works, honey. That's how the news works. If you tell me a story, that's great. I mean, the story of a write-up, we didn't used to always have pictures, so, you know, a letter or an article, a blog is one way, but, you know, we are living in an age where we have such frequent access to pictures, such accessibility to photographs and video that it's almost like picture it didn't happen, right? But if you can't then write an article, write something, write it down, document. If you do not document the kind, compassionate, helpful, positive, uplifting thing, it did not happen. How much of history are we unsure of because nobody documented it? How much of history do we get to know about because someone documented it? If you don't document the news, the event, the good or positive thing, doesn't matter. And then you have to share it. You have to share it, because if you don't share it, if you write a diary, if you write a document, if you take a picture and then you throw it away, or it gets lost, or it gets burned, and no one else sees it, maybe it was cathartic for you, but it didn't really happen either, did it? If nobody found Anne Frank's diary, we wouldn't have gotten to read it. We wouldn't know about her, would we? Sorry. Do the thing. Believe that it's good news. Document it. Share it. And prioritize them as much as other things. Really. Like, if you're not prioritizing the fact that these things are happening. And by that I mean like reshifting our expectations, the mindset work, the energetics. I want you to reshift your brain to think that this is worthy. This is worthy. The dog sticking their head out the window is worthy. Take the picture. There's less good news showing up online because nobody thinks to document it and share it. Or maybe they document it, but they don't share it. So it has to happen that we're doing the thing, we're documenting it, we're sharing it, and we're believing that it's worthy to do all of those things. Okay. So now I want to ask you some questions. How would your life change if you only heard something that lifted your... Sorry. How would your life change if you heard something that lifted your faith up in humanity every day? If we had good news in our lives every day. And what if you only heard those things instead of things that made you worry about people and circumstances being bad? You know, what if we... So think about that for yourself. I want you to think about, like, how would your life change if you had something that boosted your faith in humanity every single day? And what would that be like if, in another reality, if, like, you didn't hear anything bad about people and circumstances and you only heard good things? And then what would that do for you and your health and your well-being and success? If you started hearing, you can think about it like if you heard one thing a day or if you only heard good things every day. How would that affect your health and your well-being and success? Think about it. And you can share here on Instagram. And are you willing to try it? Even if you're still, skeptical. Even if you're still skeptical, like, I don't know how effective this is going to be, whatever. I want you to just still try it and think about being willing to try it. Think about being willing. And then take it to the next level. What if you stopped waiting to hear about good news and started making your own instead? And then what if it became an ethical issue to share good news instead of thinking about whether or not to be focused in on these issues on whatever your local news channel has decided to show you that day to become upset about? And by that I mean, what if you decided that for your joy, for your purpose, and for you being a successful person, which we can argue is an ethical issue, because if you are not happy fulfilling your purpose and successful, you cannot really contribute to society. You can't help your family. And the intake of good versus bad news can contribute to your joy, which then ripples into all of those things. What if it became an ethical issue for you of whether or not you are going to intake and share good news? What if it was just an ethical issue of, am I going to spread good news today? If I don't spread good news today, I am not in line with my own ethical code. If I partake in watching basic bitch news, I am not in line with my ethics. Every time I passively consume basic bitch news, I am not in line with my ethics. I will not consume basic bitch news anymore. That's a new affirmation. It is not ethical for me to consume basic bitch news. I only consume good news. I only create good news. And gosh, I will never contribute an event that would ever make it on Basic Bitch News. If I was going to be on the Basic Bitch News, they would have to preface it with, Oh, well, we've got some good news today. Every time I've ever been on like a regular news channel on TV, they've always had to say something like that. And in good news, make sure that if you're ever on the news, they have to say something like that as a segue. Okay. And if I don't, it's not possible no one else will share the good news. Exactly. Like it has to start with you. Yes. Okay. If you have any other questions, let me know. And for the giveaway from last week, this week's winner is April. So I will contact you for your address, and congratulations on winning the package. Thank you for sharing your screenshot. I really appreciate you. And you won $130 worth of goodies, and I'll get that shipped off to you later. And then as far as homework, here are some things that you can do to promote good news. One, comment on your local news station's social media and say something kind and respectful like, I love it when you include positive news segments. Don't say something negative, say something positive, like, I love it when you do this. Number two, watch the scene in Anchorman 2 when Ron Burgundy's team goes live on the news for the first time and they talk about things that they think people want to hear, and because they've never done live news before like this, and they end up talking about animals and home runs and the weather, and it's called What's Right with America on YouTube, and I think it's funny. Okay, number three, when you hear someone share a negative news story or headline, respond with something positive happening in the world. You can find a story to prep yourself with. And this is really good advice for when you're hanging out with family at the holidays, because a lot of times people will try to bring up stuff that they've seen on the basic bitch news, and you can be like, well, I've heard that vaping is down with teenagers, and smoking is down across the board for the first time. And then they're like, oh, and you could just have like a bunch of them. You can put them in your phone or put them on a little sticky note and just be like, oh, well, for everything you say, I'm going to redirect the conversation into good news. Share a positive news story on social media. You're getting one every week here. You can find the link online. Just Google what I talked about, like cops sharing turkeys speeding tickets or something, and then, Google that and then share the link on your social media. That'd be cool. Make a list of things you see people doing out in the world that could be considered good news. The same way that I'm asking you every week, like, what's your good news? I want you to come in here hot with good news. I want you to think about your magical merriment moments before you come in here. And I want you to think about your good news that you see out in the world. What is your good news? As you're going throughout the week, be like, oh, I have homework. I have homework. What is my joy? What am I looking for? I'm looking for helpers, as Fred Rogers said. I'm looking for the helpers out in the world. You can interview someone who's always creating good news. When you see somebody out in the world that's like doing something like that or helping, you can just say, can you tell me more about that? Tell me more. Stop watching the news for a week and see how it affects you. If you're a news watcher, just try it for a week. No more basic bitch news. Use the time that you were watching the news to deliberately focus on a cause you care about. Think about the Target analogy and only go into the aisles that you really do care about. Number 10 is to focus on embodying joy so that you can become a positive news story in the future. What do you want to be on the news for? If you could be like, and in good news, what is the news that you want to do? What is the news that you want to create? Not necessarily like a micro thing, but a big thing. What event do you want to put on? What transformation do you want to experience as a person? What joy do you want to feel? so that you can go out and create joy and spread joy. What is your passion here as a merriment maker? And how can you create a positive news story so that you're on the news? 11, do an act of kindness and be your own good news and hashtag merriment making. Kindness is always good news. 12, introduce someone else to the world of merriment making. That's awesome. And we're having a sale right now. And I mean, merriment making isn't only the Merriment Makers group, but this whole entire world of kindness, joy, fun. And if you tell somebody else like what this is of creating joy or embodying joy, creating joy, and spreading joy, I think that would be a really nice gift. And then lastly, follow good news accounts. And there are some great ones. My account is a good one. There's also Tank's Good News, Good News Network, Global Positive News, Upworthy, Some Good News Movement, Good News Feeds, Openly Gay Animals, Bright Side of IG, Good News Dog, Today Show, Yes Magazine, Your Positive News, and The Happy Broadcast. And that will all be shared in an Instagram post on my feed, also Facebook. So stay tuned for that. And that is mostly it. I wanted to show you a card draw from my deck. So this is my deck, the Merriment Missions deck, and for my good news card, I picked one of my kindness examples, and the card that I picked is pick up 5 pieces of litter. And I don't know if you know this, there's a video coming out later this week, but whenever I do a guerrilla art, street art installation, I'll pick up litter when I do that, just to kind of compensate for, any residual litter that I end up leaving because of the installation, like the poster that I'm leaving or whatever. So it's kind of like a give and take to the universe. So I'll make sure that I pick up litter. So I documented myself doing that as like proof, I guess, but also for this mission, the proof of this mission, because document and spread, share the information, because Pixar, it didn't happen. Okay. So also, what I should also tell you is if you are interested in good news, I do good news texts. So this is a service where I send you a text every weekday, and so you're getting 5 every week, or at least, and every day you get a good news story. So I am constantly surfing the internet and social media to find really fun good news stories, and they are uplifting, they're interesting, they're fun, they're topical, they're societal, psychological, they're wonderful. And so you get a link to that and a highlight of like a synopsis of what the article is about, the story, and then you get an extra thing. So the extra thing will be something like a fun fact, and that fun fact will come with a digital image, or it'll be a positive affirmation with an image, or it'll be a weird historical fact with an image, or an inspiring quote, or a pun. I make these like visual puns that I design myself, and it's all really, really, really fun. And you can get that at uncustomary.org/texts, TEXTS. And you can find everything on my hub of uncustomary.org or the link in my bio. So yeah, I mean, this is the way to kind of get your joy quota met. And I, as a merriment maker myself, as like a professional merriment maker, my job is really to kind of like give you these joy boosters, these joy injections throughout the day and the week and the month and the year. So I'm constantly finding and producing new ways to lift you up. And, you go to the accountant to do your taxes, you go to the plumber to get your plumbing done, you go to the mechanic to get your car fixed, and you come to me to help facilitate joy, because I know that the world is difficult to navigate, especially as an adult, and I want to make sure that there are passive systems in place on autopilot for you to embody, create, and spread joy. So there are systems available to you that don't really need to require any effort from you. So every day you can just look at your phone and be like, oh, that's right. There is absolute beauty in the world. And maybe it comes at just the right time. I want to continue to uplift you over and over and over again. And that is why the Merriment Makers is so great, because it helps you on all three levels. It helps you feel good, create joy, with your passion, and it helps you spread joy out into the world, because all three are necessary. So I hope that's helpful. I hope that you'll consider, getting some good news text. Oh, and the good news text comes with the Merriment Makers. It's part of your membership. So, I mean, that is on its own only like $11 less than what the first month would be. So it's honestly just get the first month at half off. The deal is insane. It's literally like half of what Operation Merriment is on its own right now. The deal is insane right now. It's insane. It's insane. So just get the half off for your first month. Lock in that early bird price, and yeah, prices are going up on December 1st. So if you ever wanted to join the Merriment Makers, now is the time. With our new site and everything, that's so beautiful and great. Okay, well, I hope that you are spreading good news. You have to feel good to do good, and this time next week, forever, until I don't do this anymore, which I don't see happening. I'm very excited. Okay, yeah, thanks for joining in. I love you, and have a great rest of your day. Next time I see you, it'll be December. Okay, bye-bye.